So our next talk is All Remote UX at Scale, and it's Christie Lenneville, who is the UX director of Gitlab, is joining us for this. And Christie currently leads a team of almost 60 UX practitioners at Gitlab. So that's a lot of people, if you weren't if you weren't already sure. She started practicing UX over 20 years ago as a web designer / developer, content strategist, technical writer. So she has seen firsthand how our industry has evolved. And I bet she maybe even had the title of webmaster at some point based on that list. So her focus is enabling other UXers, or her current focus is enabling other UXers to do their best work and helping her team channel their talent and creativity into making amazing things, which sounds like a really great mission. She's going to be talking about scaling a UX team at high velocity, because like you just mentioned, Preet, Gitlab has one of the biggest, or the biggest remote team, or set of remote, remote team. That's the right term. Yep. And that remote team has grown from about 15 to 60 in the last year. So Christie has learned a lot in that time and is going to share her insights with us. Thanks so much for joining us, Christie.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here. Let me share my screen. So as Val mentioned, my name is Christie Lenneville, and today I'm going to be talking to you about all remote UX at scale. So why is this topic near and dear to my heart? It's because I lead the UX department at Gitlab, the world's largest all remote company. And for anyone who isn't familiar, Gitlab is an end-to-end DevOps platform that enables teams to plan, manage, deploy, monitor, and secure the software they're building. And I feel incredibly privileged to have had the opportunity to both hire and lead what is possibly the world's largest, or at least one of the world's largest, all remote UX teams. Today, I want to talk about our one-year journey from 16 to 60 UX leaders, product designers, UX researchers, and technical writers. And I'll start by talking about how we hired so many amazing UXers over the last year. So when I joined Gitlab in February of 2019, we had 16 UXers, 10 designers, 2 researchers, and 4 technical writers. And today we have 11 leaders, 32 designers, 6 researchers, and 11 writers. It was an incredible investment in UX, and our product has definitely seen the benefits of having such a strong UX team. And we talked to a lot of amazing UX practitioners as we grew the team. So I want to share with you a few things that we found to be important for hiring people who will succeed in an all remote environment. So first, we tend to hire people who have at least some experience working remote. After the events of the last few weeks, that'll be basically everyone. Candidates don't have to have worked all remote, but we found that experience working at least with a distributed team really helps. All remote isn't the right fit for everyone, and that's okay. Some people really prefer working face-to-face, but they don't realize it until they try things a different way. We also conduct all of our interviews remotely. A remote interview shows how well the candidate can tell a story over video, and not everyone is comfortable with this. Some people really thrive when they can engage with the energy in a room. We also ask candidates to share a case study of work that they've done that they're proud of. We found this is a good proxy for how they'll share their UX work with their team. Do they only share their end result? If so, what we're really interested in is their process, not just the final designs, but how they got there. And we also want to understand how they share their day-to-day work with their team. Do they document their work and share it broadly where others can find it and comment on it? That's really important when you're working with an all remote team. We're also looking for people who are great collaborators. Do they proactively bring their cross-functional partners into their process, or do they throw their design or research over the wall and just expect someone to implement it? In an all remote company, this is especially important because your peers can't just walk over to your desk to ask a question or give feedback. Now, I think humility is always important, but it's especially important in an all remote company. You want people who are proactive about encouraging input. At Gitlab, we call this having short toes. People who seek out different opinions and probe to find where their ideas might fail. Facilitating a cross-functional conversation is how you end up with great designs. And lastly, while we hire all over the world, and our teams are widely distributed across time zones, we do think about a candidate's team and working hours to make sure they won't feel isolated. Now, many of these are traits that are important in any UX role, but we found them to be especially important in all remote. Very quickly, if you're wondering how our UX department of 60 works, it's something like this. Designers are mostly partnered with a single product manager, though some support two, and they work as part of an embedded cross-functional team that includes engineers. Researchers and writers support several teams, but those teams have a related subject matter focus. Design managers support a larger section of the product based on subject matter, and their job is to make sure that designers understand the bigger picture and then also have everything they need to succeed. While research and writing managers support the entire research or technical writing team. And then we also have a small team that's dedicated to shepherding our design system, but every UXer is expected to contribute. And this is really important because the people actually using the design system have great insight into how it needs to grow over time. So now let's talk about managing all remote UX at scale. When I joined GitLab a little over a year ago, I knew that our team would be rapidly expanding. And it was important for me to quickly understand both what was working well and what needed improvement. So I spent my first month mostly listening to the team. I didn't want to make assumptions based on previous experience because every team and its culture are different. The worst thing I could have done was to begin changing things that I didn't understand but were actually working well. Instead, I wanted to focus on uncovering my team's pain points. So it was basically an internal research project. And based on those conversations, here are some of the themes that I uncovered. First, they wanted more design collaboration. They were getting good feedback from their product managers and engineering partners, but it was different than the feedback that they knew they'd get from other UXers. And they also wanted more collaboration with their product managers. They often felt like they were missing context that would help them better understand the business problem they were attempting to solve. And in a company where we frequently communicate asynchronously, it was easy for those important details to get obscured. They also wanted more context about work that was happening in other product areas. It's always easy to get siloed in your own little part of the product, but this is especially true when you're all remote. But when you're designing end-to-end workflows, you really need to understand the larger problem that's being solved. And you also need a way to understand possible dependencies and areas where you need to maintain consistency. And then lastly, even though they were all remote, they still wanted to feel like they had work friends because the social aspect of work is important too. So my approach was this. Most importantly, we would keep the good things. This was really critical to making sure the team was working effectively, but it was also key to building their trust. They needed to know that I wasn't going to come in and mess around with the good things they were already doing. Also, we agreed to run everything new as a pilot, and I actively invited feedback from the team about how well changes were working. We also agreed that we would stop doing anything new that didn't show a clear improvement in their day-to-day jobs. And we would go into any new initiative assuming that at least part of it was wrong. This encouraged us to continue iterating to make it better. One of the first initiatives we rolled out was a pair designer program. This was to address the team's concern that they weren't getting the amount of design feedback and collaboration that they wanted. So for designers who work in an office, they can just look across the aisle and have a pretty good idea of whether they would be interrupting someone's workflow with a question. But in an all remote team, they had no idea. So they felt cautious about reaching out. In our pair design program, every designer is assigned to another designer who is their go-to person for ideation and feedback. We make sure to assign pairs in compatible time zones, but we also try to partner people who wouldn't normally work together. This gives everyone an opportunity to see product areas that they wouldn't otherwise. And then every 6 months, we switch the pairs up so that we get to know new people better and also experience other product areas more deeply. There are no constraints on how the pairs work together. Some like to meet ad hoc, others have a regularly scheduled sync, but this time is for them, so it's really about what works for their partnership. And as you can see from the quote from Alexis on this slide, the designers really like the program. And I want to say hi to Alexis because I think you're on this call. We also started hosting a UX showcase for 1 hour every other week. again, to increase visibility into work that was happening in other product areas. So 4 designers share for 15 minutes each, and we record the conversation and post it on YouTube so that anyone who isn't available at the time can still take advantage. And that also lets us share the recordings broadly with the rest of the company so that they know what we're up to too. The UX Showcase is one of my very favorite activities because I always learn so much from my team. What I might have absorbed from just being around my team in an office, we have to take the time to intentionally share. And because we record it, we can look back over time to see the progression of work that we've done. And if you'd like to see an example, I've added a short link to a UX Showcase by Jeremy Elder, who is our brilliantly talented visual design lead, who is also on this call. And in it, he talks about our upcoming migration from Sketch to Figma, our newly updated color palettes, and also our new UX Foundations team. So at Gitlab, we try to work as asynchronously as we can. And that's a core philosophy for our all remote company because not everyone is in a time zone that allows them to be in the same place at the same time. But we have found that at the beginning of a project, it's often helpful to get the team together for a face-to-face discussion. And these kickoffs are cross-functional because it's important to have UX, the product manager, and engineers all on the same page. And it offers an opportunity for the PM to clarify the business goal and the engineers to take note of any known constraints. But more importantly, it allows the team to brainstorm together about potential solutions. The key to these kickoffs is to keep them short, so usually 30 minutes, at most an hour, and make sure that the team comes in with context about the problem to be solved. It's also important to clearly set the scope of the problem that the team is solving. And we also make sure to document both the discussion and the outcome so that we have a record of the decisions we made, and anyone who can't attend can easily catch up. And as with every other meeting, we record these kickoffs and we post them to YouTube for anyone who wants to see everything that happened. Now back to asynchronous activities. Some of our designers also record video walkthroughs of their design work to keep their teams up to date. Prior to this, they likely shared low fidelity sketches or wireframes with their team in what we call issues, other products call tickets. The video walkthrough is most appropriate for when a design is getting ready to move into development. And the point of the walkthrough is to step the cross-functional team through a prototype, sharing the end-to-end workflow and rationale for the intended solution. And the designer also talks about options that they thought about but discarded for whatever reason. This is a great way to make sure that the PM and the engineers all understand the design. And this is the same thing that designers in a traditional company would usually do face-to-face. But in an all-remote company, we have to make an effort to ensure that everyone has access to the information that they need. So as always, we post the video to YouTube. But designers usually also post a link to the video in the issue too, so that their team can leave comments or questions. And if you visit the short link on this slide, you can see an example from Kyle, one of our designers for the security section of our product. And the last activity I'll talk about is asynchronous set sketching. So as designers, we're used to getting our teams in a room with a whiteboard, sticky notes, and markers to brainstorm together. But when you're all remote, you have to get creative about how you lead these collaborative design activities. It's still possible though. Most importantly, you want to start by documenting clear, simple instructions for the team to make sure that they understand what's being asked of them. And then you need to offer them a space to collaborate. So we often use Mural, but we use GitLab issues too, which you can see on this slide. And you can see that a variety of people contributed sketches to this activity. The designer made sure to remind her team that good drawing was not the point. And she even pointed out that her drawings were going to be ugly too. So if you're interested, you can visit the short link on this slide to see the asynchronous sketching session that Sun Jung, who I think also is on this call, facilitated recently for her team. It's important to remember that when someone shares an idea asynchronously, they aren't going to get the same feedback that they'd naturally get in an in-person session through body language or facial expressions. And that can be really nerve-wracking. So as the facilitator, you have to make sure to encourage them with supportive comments. Emojis are a great way to give feedback too. And as always, make sure the results are documented someplace where everyone can find them. So everything I've talked about so far has been a more formal activity, but oftentimes designers want informal collaboration too. So one of our team members set up a Slack channel just for this purpose. When a designer wants some ad hoc feedback and their peer designer isn't available, or if they just have some extra time to give feedback, they pop a note into the UX co-working channel. I also see them posting designs there for quick asynchronous feedback. So you may have noticed that I frequently brought up the idea of documenting both your discussions and your outcomes. In an all-remote company, that's probably the single most important thing that you can do, because when you're remote, you really have to be intentional about sharing information. So at Gitlab, we document absolutely everything. We document our designs and rationale in issues and videos. We document our research findings in a searchable repository that's accessible to everyone in the company. We have a Google Doc with an agenda for literally every meeting, and everyone on the call helps document both the discussion and the decisions that we make. And lastly, we document our team processes in our company handbook, which is accessible to anyone in the world. The handbook is kind of amazing. We update it dozens of times every single day, and everyone in the company is responsible for keeping it up to date because it's a real-time view into how we work. If you're interested, you should check it out. The short link on this slide takes you to the UX section. So the last thing I'll mention is that even though we work together through technology, we're all still human, and it's important not to forget it. That's why we schedule hangouts that are purely social. In an office, you'd have those conversations at lunch or when you pass someone in the hall, but in an all-remote company, you have to set aside time for the fun stuff. We also try to check in on each other just to say hi. Slack can be a good way to quickly reach out. It's also really important to remember to give positive feedback for the good work that your peers do. So at Gitlab, we have a dedicated Slack channel just for this purpose, and it gets many, many messages every single day. And also, anyone can nominate a peer for a discretionary bonus of $1,000, and our company goal is for 10% of the company to receive a bonus each month. And lastly, we actively remind each other that we don't have to hide our families from our work. Kids and pets are always welcome in our calls, and when someone apologizes for the interruption, we invite an even bigger interruption. So this is a picture of my own 2 kids, and they have definitely participated in a meeting or 2. So in conclusion, all remote UX works. You just have to be intentional about it. You have to be proactive about reaching out. You have to reach out again when you don't get the information you need. You have to record and share everything. You have to document everything. And lastly, you have to remember, we're all human. So be human, embrace it, enjoy yourself.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Christie. That was an incredible,
really
incredible presentation. Thank you so much for joining us today at Remote Design Week.
Sincerely been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.